Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Kimberly Carey. I am the owner of So Sassy Stitcher in Northwest Arkansas. I am working on my block of the month, Westport. This one I'm just doing as my own block of the month. Here is the big picture of it. So this one today, block 4, I totally changed up the instructions because I like to do my flying geese a different way. So I did it in the Eleanor Burns method. So I changed up what the size of my cutting instructions are. The other thing that I changed is for these squares right here, I did not make them triangles. I made them squares. So I increased the size and decreased the amount of squares or triangles that I cut because of that. So first thing I'm going to do with you is go over my cutting instructions. So I'm going to show this to you. So for fabric 1, I did 6 4-inch squares, okay? And this is gonna be for these right here, okay? They're gonna be half square triangles. Instead of doing these 45-degree half square triangles, I just did squares instead. There's really no reason to go through all of this. And then I cut, instead of 2-inch strips and doing 90 quarter square triangles, we are doing 3 4.5-inch squares, okay? And this is for flying geese, okay? And I'll show you that. If you want a different method of your flying geese, then you're gonna have to figure out if this is correct for you or not. So 3 4.5-inch squares and then 3 6-inch squares. And again, these are for the flying geese. The 2-inch squares, yes, you need the 2-inch squares. You need 12 of them, okay? So you can do that. And then the 1.5-inch strips, those are correct. Those are our outer borders that we need. Fabric 4 is exactly what it says. So we are doing the 3.5-inch squares. I had a piece left over that had been set aside from block 1, so I just cut that up. It was a little longer than this 12 inches because I hadn't trimmed it down, but I got that out of that strip. All right, fabric 5. Again, this is for my flying geese, and so I did 6 4-inch squares, and then is that right? Okay, this is not for the flying geese. This is for this strip right here, okay? And then the 3 4.5-inch squares is for the flying geese. And then fabric 9, we want 3 6-inch squares for the flying geese as well. Okay, so I'm gonna go through that with you. Mine are a little bit oversized because I actually had the wrong sizes to begin with, but these are the sizes that you need for what it says, because the way that they have their sizes for the flying geese in the instructions is a little wonky. But the first thing that we're gonna do is I'm gonna walk you through these corner blocks right here. So what I did was I have my 2 sets of squares, okay? And I actually drew a line down the middle and then just did a 1/4 inch on either side, okay? Best thing to do is throw this under the iron, make sure it's nice and flat. And then what we're gonna do is I am just going to cut these in half. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm sewing before I'm cutting these in half, and I'm not using my fancy 1/4 square triangle ruler or half square triangle ruler because it does not matter. All right, and then this is stable, and I'm not sewing on an open bias, which is going to cause it to stretch and be wonky. Okay, so now I can throw these under the iron and open these up. I'm also going to just shave this off a little bit. The other thing that I can do is for these need to be, per the instructions, 3.5 inches square. So you can iron them open and trim them up. The other thing that I can do is I can take my triangle square up ruler, find my 3.5, and I'm gonna place that. I'm gonna place this, get you zoomed in a little bit better here. There we go. Okay, so you're gonna place this red dotted line on the stitch line, like so. And then I am going to trim that up just like that. Okay, so now when I open this up, I already have a 3.5 inch perfect square. Okay, I can do the same thing for this other one. Again, 3.5 inches. On that stitch line, just like that. Okay, and then I have 3.5 inches. For this one, okay, I've got some ironing instructions because it doesn't tell me. I am going to iron, even though it's somewhat counterintuitive, I am going to iron towards that white. Normally, I would iron towards the dark, but the reason I'm doing that is because I know when I do my flying geese, the seam is gonna be towards this direction because of the way that we make our flying geese. So I need this one to be opposite so I get a little snuggle seam right there. So it is opposite of what I would normally do, but it does make it work a little bit better. All right, so now that I have this square, okay, now I'm gonna take one of my 2-inch squares, my D squares, okay, made sure it's 2 inches. I've got a line down the center diagonally. It's gonna go on top of the blue, and I'm gonna stitch down that diagonal line, okay? Then I'm gonna iron this open, just like this. It should nicely fill out the square, okay? And then I can take my 1/4 ruler and put on there, and I'm just gonna trim that excess off, and then I've got a nice 1/4 inch seam, just like that, okay? Make sure that that's nice and crisp and open, and there we have our corner block. And we have to have a total of 12 of those, and so that's why you need 12 Ds, but only 6 of these squares, because I get 2 out of each of these bigger squares. So that is our cornerstone blocks. Now we're gonna move on to our flying geese. So the way that I like to do our flying geese, the reason I like to do it this way is because they come out nice and crisp and square, and they do not turn out wonky. Okay, sometimes when we're doing our flying geese, because we're sewing on that bias, those corners get a little bit wonky. So it makes it to where I'm not sewing on with an open bias, and I get to trim them up and make them just right. All right, so you can see what I have here. So I've got the proper color combination, okay? So my fabric that is going to be the main piece of my flying geese is actually my top piece. This one is a little bit different than these that I have here. So for this one, my big piece is gonna be my green, my little piece is gonna be my white. For this one, My wings are the white, my center is the blue, okay? So it is my smaller piece. It's gonna go on top so that I have an equal amount around each side. Then what I'm gonna do is I use my little 1/4 inch on either side ruler, and I just put it down the diagonal of my piece. It doesn't have to go clear to the ends of these outer pieces. You really just need that inner piece, okay? And then I use whatever marking pen I prefer, and I mark down either side. Then I'm gonna throw that in the sewing machine, and I'm gonna stitch along those lines that I just made. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my ruler and I am going to cut down the center, okay? It may not line up exactly perfect. I'm not quite on that diagonal. That's okay. I just want to be as close as possible in that center. And I'm going to cut down just like that, okay? Now I'm going to iron these open. And when I iron them open, I am going to iron towards the bigger rectangle, okay? Which again is counterintuitive. Usually we go towards the dark and we go towards the smaller piece, okay? So it's a little bit backwards from what we normally do, but there is a reason that we do this, okay? So I'm just gonna finger press these so that I can show you. Now we have this kind of funky square. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have one on the bottom, and then I'm gonna lay my second piece opposite on top. And I'm just gonna match my edges as best I can, okay? So now you can see I have a dark on the bottom down here and a dark on top here. And then I have kind of this strip here that is the same color. This is exactly how I want it. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my little ruler again and my marking pen, and I'm gonna mark on either side of my ruler. And then I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm gonna stitch along those lines that I just made. If you don't like the blue on blue, if that's hard for you to see, I can swap pens and make sure, or just get a pen that'll show up on both, which can be hard with a super dark and a super light. Okay, so I'm gonna take that to my sewing machine and I end up with this, okay? It's what we just had. I've got my stitch lines. Now, I'm gonna take my ruler and I am going to cut this in half, okay? Each set of these will make 4 geese, 4 flying geese, okay? So if you have flying geese that you only have 1 or 2 of the same thing, or they have different corners and they're not flip-flopped, then, you know, or mirror imaged, then you're gonna have to go to a different method to do your flying geese. This really only works if the flying geese are all the same. All right, so now I have this guy right here. So what I'm gonna do is, because I wanna be able to iron in different directions, I'm gonna give a little snip right in the center, okay, of that. And I'm not cutting through the stitches. I am just snipping in that seam allowance, okay? So that when I open this up, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna iron this side this way and this side this way and create my, it's not even a fan effect, okay? They're just open different directions so that this lays nice and flat. So I'm gonna take that to my iron and I'm gonna iron that open. So now you can see I have this open, nice and flat, all right? and I've got that snipped in the middle so that I don't have anything wonky. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my flying geese ruler. There's different sizes of these, and depending on, again, the size of the finished flying geese that you want is going to be help you determine what size of pieces to start with. So I'm doing a 1.5 by 3 finished, which means that it needs to be a 2 by 3.5 sized flying geese. And that's what's a little bit confusing in here, is it wants a 2 by 3.5 finished flying geese, which is not a normal size, but that's the unfinished size. Okay, and by unfinished, we mean it's not in the block, that size. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it sideways here for just a minute, and I'm gonna line up this dark line along the interior of my piece. And I'm gonna cut these two apart. And again, normally I would not have this much excess on this, but I had mine oversized a little bit because I didn't select the correct size. All right, so now I can trim this up. So now I have two sides trimmed. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this around like this. I'm gonna keep my ruler pointed the same direction that it was, and I'm gonna line up two different points. Okay, I want to make sure that this edge is correct, but I'm going to line up this line here against the top, and then the this line here that's actually for the other flying geese size is going to be along the one edge of my triangle. So now I can finish cutting this one flying geese. Okay, and you can see that these points are just right. Okay, and that's how I do my flying geese. And so I'll show you one more here. So I'm going to put this so that these lines follow my triangle. I'm going to cut along the top and along one side. If you have a spinning mat, that can be helpful for these. Get through my seam there. And then turn that around. My ruler is the same rotation that it was before. And then I am lining up this line here along the top and this line here along the one side of my triangle. I need to put some grippers on this ruler because it wants to slip a little bit, but there I have another flying geese. So that's what I'm going to do for all of those flying geese. And again, it makes it to where my wings aren't wonky and pulling because I didn't sew on the bias and stretch them out when I ironed. Okay, so these are going to get put together with my other flying geese, and I'm just going to then put it together just like I would any other 9-patch block. I'm going to do those 9 patches. Okay, and then put my borders on the outside. So that is how we do that one. I hope this helps you out, and those cutting instructions. And again, I'm just kind of winging it. I'm hoping that as I progress, then I don't run out of any fabric. Generally, the Stitch and Snip is pretty good at giving a little bit of extra. So we'll see how I end up. But happy quilting. Hope this helps you out, and I can't wait to see your finished product.